There is a quiet terror that lives in the space between who you are and who you are becoming. And right now, in this moment, you might be experiencing that terror without even recognizing it. You might be mistaking a profound psychological transformation for a personal failure. You might be interpreting the silence of another human being as a verdict on your own worth. But here is the uncomfortable truth that most people never realize. The pain you are feeling right now is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the first indication that something you never understood about yourself is finally demanding to be seen. You have been trained your entire life to believe that connection is about presence, that love is proven by proximity, that if someone matters to you, they will be there. And if they are not there, it means you have been abandoned, rejected, or forgotten. This is the most dangerous piece of misinformation your mind has ever accepted, because it has nothing to do with how human psychology actually works. What if the distance you are experiencing is not an ending, but a psychological necessity? What if the silence is not a message about you, but a reflection of something happening so deep inside another person that they themselves do not have words for it yet? And what if the intensity of your own emotional response, the thing you have been judging yourself for, the thoughts you cannot stop thinking, the name that will not leave your mind, what if all of it is not a sign of weakness, but evidence that a part of you understands something your conscious mind refuses to accept? This is not a love story. This is a psychology lesson. And by the time you understand what is actually happening inside you, inside them, and inside the invisible space between you, you will never experience emotional distance the same way again. Psychological setup. Let us begin with a question that most people never ask themselves with enough honesty. Why does absence hurt so much? Not the practical absence, not the logistical distance, but the psychological absence. The kind where someone is physically present in the world, breathing, existing, going about their life, and yet you cannot reach them, you cannot feel them, you cannot understand why they have retreated. If you examine this experience through the lens of behavioral psychology, you will discover something immediately. Human beings are not wired to process ambiguous loss. When someone dies, there is a framework for grief. When a relationship officially ends, there is a narrative you can tell yourself. But when someone simply withdraws, when they become silent without explanation, when they are still alive but unreachable, your brain enters a state of cognitive dissonance that it was never designed to handle. This is where the psychological confusion begins. Your mind, seeking resolution, starts generating explanations. It tells you that you did something wrong. It tells you that they never cared. It tells you that you imagined the connection. It tells you anything that provides a closed loop, because your brain would rather have a painful answer than no answer at all. But here is the hidden layer that changes everything. What if their withdrawal has nothing to do with you? And I do not mean that in the comforting, platitudinal way that people say it to make you feel better. I mean it in the clinical, psychological sense. What if the behavior you are witnessing is not a response to you, but a symptom of something happening entirely within their own psyche? Think about this carefully. Every human being carries within them what Carl Jung called the shadow self. It is the collection of disowned parts, the emotions they have learned to suppress, the fears they have never faced, the vulnerabilities they have armored against. And here is the critical detail. The closer someone gets to you, the more your presence activates their shadow. Because intimacy, real intimacy, is not just a meeting of two people. It is a collision of two unconscious worlds. When someone withdraws from you, it is often not because they have stopped caring. It is because the intensity of what they feel has triggered a defense mechanism so ancient, so automatic, that they do not even recognize it as a choice. They are not choosing to leave you. They are being pulled back into themselves by forces they do not understand. And you, on the other side of this distance, are doing exactly what human psychology predicts. You are personalizing the impersonal. You are taking a symptom of their internal war and interpreting it as a judgment on your value. This is not a flaw in you. It is a design feature of the human mind. We are meaning-making machines, and when we do not have information, we create it. The problem is that the information we create is almost always wrong. So let us stop for a moment and establish what is actually happening, psychologically speaking. There is a connection between you and another person that feels significant. That significance is not imaginary. Neuroscience has demonstrated that when we form deep bonds with others, our neural pathways literally reshape. The other person becomes encoded in your brain's representation of safety, reward, and meaning. When that person becomes unavailable, your brain experiences a withdrawal state that mirrors substance addiction. This is not poetry. This is brain chemistry. But there is another layer that most discussions of this phenomenon miss entirely. While you are experiencing withdrawal, they may be experiencing overwhelm. And these two states, withdrawal and overwhelm, look identical from the outside. Both result in silence. Both result in distance. Both result in the appearance of disconnection. But they come from completely opposite places. You are interpreting their silence through the lens of your withdrawal. You are assuming that because you feel abandoned, they must be abandoning. But what if their silence comes from a place of being flooded? What if they have retreated not because you mean nothing, but because you mean too much? What if their nervous system, faced with the depth of what it feels, has gone into protective shutdown? This is not a spiritual concept. This is a physiological reality. The human autonomic nervous system has three primary states: social engagement, fight or flight, and shutdown. When a person is overwhelmed by emotional intensity that they do not have the psychological resources to process, their system can drop into shutdown as a protective measure. It is not a choice. It is a survival response. And here is the cruel irony. The very depth of connection that makes this bond meaningful is also what triggers the shutdown. If you meant less to them, they could handle it. If the connection were superficial, they could maintain contact without threat. But because something real exists, something that bypasses their defenses and touches places they have kept hidden, their psyche responds as if under attack. You are not being rejected. You are being reacted to. And there is a profound difference. The hidden pattern. Now we must move deeper. Because if all we understood was that withdrawal can be a response to overwhelm, we would still only have half the picture. The more complete psychological truth is that distance in a deep connection follows predictable patterns. And once you understand these patterns, you stop being a victim of your own interpretations and start seeing the architecture of what is really happening. Let me introduce you to a concept from attachment theory that most people never hear about. It is called the protest behavior despair cycle. When a bond is threatened, the person experiencing the threat goes through two distinct phases. The first is protest. This is when you reach out, you check for signs, you try to reestablish contact, you become preoccupied with the other person. This phase is driven by the activation of your attachment system. Your brain is literally sounding an alarm that says, connection is in danger. Do something. But here is what you have not been told. The person who withdrew is also experiencing an attachment response. It just looks different. Their system may be in what researchers call deactivation. Deactivation is the psychological mechanism that allows someone to downregulate their attachment needs when those needs feel threatening. They are not ceasing to care. They are ceasing to feel the caring because the caring is too painful or too overwhelming. This creates a dynamic that is almost perfectly designed to cause maximum confusion. You in protest are becoming more activated. They, in deactivation, are becoming more numb. You interpret their numbness as proof that they never cared. They interpret your activation as pressure. And both of you are wrong about what is happening inside the other. Now let us add another layer from depth psychology. There is a concept called the wounded inner child. It is not a metaphor. It is a description of a real psychological structure. Parts of us that were hurt at earlier developmental stages continue to operate beneath the surface of our adult awareness. When you enter a significant connection, you are not just relating to the adult version of the other person. You are relating to all of their younger selves, and they to yours. The problem is that these younger selves do not communicate in words. They communicate in feelings, in impulses, in reactions that seem to come from nowhere. When the person who withdrew goes silent, it may be because some younger part of them has been triggered. A part that learned long ago that closeness leads to pain. A part that decided the only safe response to deep feeling was to disappear. And here is where your own psychology becomes visible. The reason you cannot stop thinking about them, the reason their name echoes in your mind, the reason you feel their absence as a physical weight, is not because you are obsessed or weak or dependent. It is because a part of you recognizes that something real is at stake. Your attachment system is not malfunctioning. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to. It is telling you that a bond you need is threatened. The problem is that your attachment system does not have access to the full picture. It only knows that connection is endangered. It does not know why. It cannot distinguish between a threat that requires action and a threat that requires patience. It just sounds the alarm and keeps sounding it until the connection is restored, or until you finally force it to go quiet through suppression. But what if the distance itself is serving a function that neither of you consciously intended? What if this pause, this silence, this separation, is actually doing psychological work that could not happen in your presence? Think about this. In your presence, the other person has access to you as a source of regulation. They can borrow your calm when they are anxious. They can use your attention to soothe their insecurity. But when you are not there, they are left with themselves. And for someone who has been avoiding themselves, this is both terrifying and necessary. The distance forces them to meet their own shadow. It removes the distraction of your presence and leaves them alone with what they have been running from. This is not punishment. This is psychological pressure applied by life itself. They cannot hide from their own fear if you are not there to hide behind. They cannot avoid their own unprocessed pain if you are not there to distract them from it. And you, in your separation, are being forced to do the same thing. You are being asked to sit with the parts of yourself that you have been using the connection to avoid. The fear of being alone. The belief that you are not enough without external validation. The desperate need for certainty in a world that offers none. This is why deep connections so often go through periods of distance. It is not because the connection was wrong. It is because the connection was real enough to activate everything in both of you that still needs to heal. The distance is not the problem. It is the evidence that the work has begun. Deeper psychology. Now we must go where most discussions of human behavior refuse to go. We must examine the unconscious motives that drive withdrawal, silence, and distance. Because until you understand what is actually happening beneath the surface, you will continue to misinterpret everything you see. Let us begin with a concept from psychoanalytic theory called repetition compulsion. It is the unconscious tendency to recreate past emotional situations in an attempt to master them. If someone experienced abandonment or rejection early in life, they may unconsciously recreate dynamics where they are abandoned or rejected again. Not because they want to suffer, but because the unconscious mind believes that this time it can get it right. This time it can stay in control. This time it can prevent what happened before. When someone withdraws from you, it may have nothing to do with you, and everything to do with a pattern they are unconsciously repeating. They are not leaving you. They are leaving everyone, everywhere, always. They are living out a script written in childhood, and you just happen to be the current actor in the scene. This is not easy to hear because it removes you from the center of the story. Your ego wants to believe that this is about you, that you did something or failed to do something, that if you were different, they would stay. But the truth is more humbling and more freeing. You are not the cause of their behavior. You are the context in which their behavior is expressing itself. Now let us add another layer from Jungian psychology. There is a concept called the anima, or animus projection. Without getting too technical, it refers to the unconscious image of the ideal other that we carry within us. When we meet someone who seems to fit this image, we project it onto them. We see in them not just who they are, but who our unconscious wants them to be. The problem is that no real person can sustain a projection. Eventually, the real person shows up, with their real flaws, their real fears, their real limitations. And when that happens, the projection shatters. This can feel like betrayal, but the person did not betray you. They just stopped being able to carry the weight of who you needed them to be. This is often what triggers withdrawal, not on your side, but on theirs. When someone realizes they are being seen through the lens of your projection, they may feel an immense pressure to be what you need. And if they cannot sustain that, if they know they will eventually disappoint you, they may retreat rather than face the moment when you see them as they really are. But there is an even deeper layer. What if they are also projecting onto you? What if they have idealized you as the one who will finally heal them, finally make them feel safe, finally give them what they never had? And what if, in your realness, you cannot carry that either? Now you have two people, each projecting onto the other, each sensing that the other cannot be what they need, and neither knowing how to simply be present with what is real. This is where silence becomes a refuge. Silence prevents the moment of disappointment. Silence freezes the connection at a point where it can still be imagined as perfect. If they never speak, they never have to hear you say something that destroys the fantasy. If they never return, they never have to face the gap between who you are and who they needed you to be. Now let us examine something even more uncomfortable. What if their withdrawal is not about fear of you, but fear of themselves? What if the feelings you have awakened in them are so powerful that they threaten the entire structure of their identity? People build their sense of self around stories. I am independent. I am strong. I do not need anyone. I am fine alone. When someone comes along who makes them feel something that contradicts these stories, their identity is threatened. The unconscious mind will do almost anything to protect the identity, even if the identity is causing suffering. It will create distance. It will generate reasons to pull away. It will find flaws in you to justify the retreat. Not because you are flawed, but because you are dangerous to the story they have been telling themselves. This is why people sometimes disappear at the exact moment when things are going well. It is not the problems that scare them. It is the connection. Problems are familiar. Struggle is familiar. Distance is familiar, but real closeness, genuine intimacy, the feeling of being truly seen and still accepted, that is unknown territory. And the human mind is wired to fear the unknown more than it fears the painful but familiar. So they retreat to the familiar. They retreat to loneliness because at least they know how to be lonely. They retreat to silence because silence does not demand that they become someone new. And you, waiting on the other side, interpret this as rejection. But it is not rejection. It is self-preservation. It is the only way they know to survive the terror of being truly seen. It is not that they do not want you. It is that wanting you threatens everything they have built their life around. This understanding does not make the pain disappear, but it changes what the pain means. It is no longer evidence of your unworthiness. It is evidence of their unreadiness. And those are two completely different things. The turning point. Now we arrive at the moment where everything shifts. Not in the external situation necessarily, but in your internal understanding. Because the real turning point in any psychological journey is not when the other person changes. It is when you stop needing them to change in order to be okay. Let me introduce you to a concept from developmental psychology called differentiation. It is the ability to remain connected to others while also remaining connected to yourself. To be close without losing yourself. To be separate without becoming distant. Most people never achieve full differentiation. They oscillate between fusion, where they lose themselves in the other, and isolation, where they protect themselves by pushing others away. The distance you are experiencing, painful as it is an invitation to differentiate. It is asking you to find a way to hold the connection in your heart while also holding yourself in your own center. It is asking you to care without clinging, to love without losing yourself, to remain open without remaining dependent. This is not easy. In fact, it may be the hardest psychological task any human being ever faces, because your attachment system is screaming at you to do the opposite. It is telling you to reach out, to fix, to control, to make contact at any cost. But here is the paradox. The more you act from that place of desperation, the more you push them away. Not because they are punishing you, but because your desperation activates their fear. Remember what we discussed earlier about deactivation. When someone is in a deactivated state, they are numb to their own feelings, your intensity, your reaching out, your expressions of need. All of it is experienced by their system as a demand they cannot meet. It confirms their fear that closeness means being overwhelmed. It justifies their retreat. But when you become still, something shifts. Not immediately, and not because you are manipulating them, but because your stillness removes the pressure. It creates space for their own feelings to rise to the surface without the interference of your need. Think about it this way. When you are constantly reaching out, you are like a person shouting into a cave. The only thing you hear is the echo of your own voice. But when you stop shouting, when you become quiet, you can finally hear what is actually in the cave. You can hear the small sounds, the movements, the presence of something other than yourself. Your psychological work during this distance is not to make them return. It is to become so centered in yourself that their absence no longer destabilizes you. It is to reach a place where you can hold the connection as real and meaningful, while also holding yourself as complete and whole. This is what the spiritual traditions call detachment, but that word is often misunderstood. Detachment does not mean not caring. It means caring so deeply that you are willing to let the other person be where they are, even if where they are is not with you. It means loving them enough to allow them their process, their timeline, their fear, their struggle, without making it mean something about your worth. Now let us look at what happens psychologically when you reach this place. First, your own anxiety decreases. The constant activation of your attachment system begins to calm. You sleep better. You think about them less obsessively. You start to remember that you had a life before them and will have one after them, regardless of what happens. Second, your perception clears. When you are not desperate, you can see more accurately. You can distinguish between what is real and what is your fear projecting. You can recognize their behavior for what it is, a reflection of their internal state, not a verdict on you. Third, and this is the part that surprises most people, your centeredness becomes attractive. Not because you are playing games, but because calm is attractive. Certainty is attractive. Wholeness is attractive. When you are no longer leaking need from every pore, you become someone that others can be near without feeling drained. Does this guarantee their return? No. Nothing guarantees that. People have free will. People have their own paths. People sometimes never heal the parts that cause them to run. But here is what is guaranteed. Whether they return or not, you will have become someone who can survive loss without being destroyed by it. You will have built something inside yourself that no one can take away. And if they do return, they will return to someone different. They will return to someone who does not need them to stay, but chooses to welcome them. They will return to someone who can hold them in their fear without being consumed by it. They will return to someone who has done the work that they themselves may still be avoiding. This is the turning point. It is not when they come back. It is when you stop living as if your wholeness depends on it. It is when you take your power back from the situation and place it where it belongs, in your own capacity to regulate your own nervous system, to hold your own experience, to be with what is without needing it to be different. And from this place, something remarkable becomes possible. You can now look at the connection with clarity. You can ask yourself questions you were too afraid to ask before. Was this connection real, or was it projection? Was it love, or was it need dressed up as love? Was it them you wanted, or was it the feeling of being wanted by them? These questions are not comfortable, but they are necessary, because until you can answer them honestly, you will remain trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment, forever waiting for someone else to give you what only you can give yourself. Integration. So what happens when you have done this work? What changes when you stop interpreting distance as rejection and start seeing it as information? What becomes possible when you can hold the connection without being held hostage by it? The first thing that changes is your relationship with uncertainty. Human beings are wired to hate uncertainty. Your brain spends enormous amounts of energy trying to predict and control the future. But the truth is that uncertainty is the only certainty. You never know what another person will do. You never know how a situation will resolve. You never know if someone will return. When you stop fighting this, something relaxes inside you. You stop demanding guarantees that life cannot provide. You start making peace with not knowing. And in that peace, you discover a kind of freedom you never had access to before. The freedom to be present without needing to control the outcome. The second change is in how you interpret their behavior. Without the filter of your own fear, you can see more clearly. You can recognize when their silence is about their own struggle, not about you. You can distinguish between someone who is healing and someone who is gone. You can hold compassion for their process without sacrificing your own well-being to it. This does not mean you become passive. It means you become discerning. You stop investing energy in people who are not investing in you. You stop waiting for someone who has made it clear they are not coming. But you also stop writing off someone who is simply in a temporary state of overwhelm. You learn to read the situation with wisdom instead of reacting to it with fear. The third change is perhaps the most important. You begin to understand that connection is not something you have or lose. It is something you are. The capacity to love, to care, to feel deeply, that is not dependent on any particular person. It is a quality of your own being. When you stop attaching it to one person, you discover that it was always there, always yours, always available. This is not about replacing them. It is about recognizing that the love you feel is not trapped in them. It flows through you. It is an expression of who you are. And who you are does not diminish just because one person cannot receive it right now. Now let us look at what this means for the possibility of reunion. If they do return, they will return to someone who has done their own work. Someone who is not waiting with bated breath, desperate for any scrap of attention. Someone who can meet them not from lack, but from fullness. And that changes everything about what is possible between you. Because when two people come together from fullness instead of lack, the dynamic is completely different. There is no grasping, no clinging, no desperate need for reassurance. There is simply two whole people choosing each other, not because they need to, but because they want to. If they do not return, you will still be whole. You will still have done work that benefits every future connection you ever have. You will still have learned something about yourself that no one can take away. You will still have grown in ways that would not have been possible without this distance. This is the integration. It is the recognition that the pain was not pointless. It was the price of admission to a deeper understanding of yourself. It was the fire that burned away the illusions you were carrying about love, about worth, about what it means to be connected to another person. And here is the final piece. The reason you could not let go before, the reason their name kept returning, the reason you felt their absence as a physical weight, all of that was not weakness. It was evidence that something real existed. You do not grieve illusions. You do not ache for people who meant nothing. The depth of your pain is a direct measure of the depth of your connection. But pain is not a destination. It is a passage. And you have been walking through it, whether you realized it or not. Every day that you woke up and kept going, every moment you chose not to numb yourself, every time you let yourself feel the loss instead of running from it, you were doing the work. You were integrating. You were becoming someone who could hold both love and loss without being destroyed by either. So now you arrive at a new place. Not a place where the pain is gone, necessarily, but a place where it no longer controls you. A place where you can hold the memory, the hope, the connection, without being held hostage by it. A place where you are whole, whether they are there or not. Closing reflection. There is a reason you made it to the end of this. Not because you are obsessed with someone who left, but because a part of you has always known that the distance was not the whole story. A part of you has always sensed that something deeper was happening beneath the surface of events. And that part of you was right. The person you are missing is carrying their own invisible weight. The silence between you is not empty. It is full of things they cannot yet say. The distance is not a wall. It is a corridor they are walking through, even if you cannot see them moving. And you, in your waiting, in your wondering, in your unwillingness to forget, you have been doing something that most people never have the courage to do. You have been holding space for something real in a world that constantly tells you to move on, to let go, to stop caring. You have been honoring a connection that your mind cannot explain, but your soul refuses to release. So here is the thought that stays with you. Not as comfort, but as truth. The love you feel is not dependent on their presence. It is not diminished by their silence. It is not waiting for their return to be real. It is real now. It has always been real. It is a fact of your inner world. And no distance, no silence, no amount of time can erase what has already been written into the fabric of your being. You are not waiting for them to come back so that love can exist. You are holding love so that if they ever do come back, they will find it still there, waiting, not as a demand, but as a gift. And if they never come back, you will know that you loved truly, deeply, fully, and that is something no one can ever take from you. The distance is not the end. It is the middle of a story neither of you can see the end of yet. And the only thing required of you now is to stay in the story, to stay open, to stay yourself, and to trust that whatever comes next will find you ready.